Ready for a mind-blowing deep dive into early humans? We're exploring Cyborgs versus the Earth Goddess, a book that really flips the script on what we thought we knew about our ancient ancestors.
You know, it's so true. We tend to fixate on the later stages of human development, like tools, agriculture, that whole man as hunter narrative.
Right, right.
But this book, it argues that to really understand ourselves, we need to rewind even further, go way back to our primate roots.
I like it back to the beginning. And that's where it gets really interesting, because it turns out those primate cousins of ours, especially bonobos, they might hold the key to understanding how domestication really started.
Exactly.
I'm not talking about crops or livestock or any of that.
This book makes the case that the first thing humans may have domesticated was, well, each other.
Oh.
And to be even more specific, women taming men.
Taming is a strong word. What does that actually mean in this context?
Yeah, good point. It's not about brute force or, control in that sense. The book uses taming to get at these complex social mechanisms.
Okay.
The ways female-led primate groups, bonobos especially, can actually influence and manage male behavior. It's all about strategic alliances and, clever conflict resolution strategies, but driven by the females.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. So are you saying those peaceful, playful bonobos we love, they might actually be a better model for understanding early humans than, say, chimps with their more hierarchical structures?
The book makes a really compelling case for that. And it all comes back to this idea of Paleo Ecogynocentrism. It argues that early human societies might have been more female-centric.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that term a little bit. Paleo Ecogynocentrism. That sounds incredibly academic. What does it really mean?
In essence, it suggests that during the Paleolithic era, like way back in the earliest period of human history, women, they may have held a more central role in social structures than we typically think.
Interesting.
And this isn't some totally new radical idea. The book, it draws parallels to the female-driven social structures that we see in, bonobos and other primates. It illustrates that physical strength isn't the be-all and end-all of power.
So instead of picturing our male ancestors dragging home the bacon, so to speak, we should be imagining women wielding influence through more social strategies and alliances.
Exactly. For example, the book talks about how female primates, even in species where males are physically larger, they exert influence through things like mate choice, strategic mate choice.
Oh, interesting.
Like female chimpanzees, they will often favor males who are, who exhibit more cooperative behavior,
Ah, okay.
This can really shape the social dynamics of the entire group.
It's like they're saying, if you want to be in my circle, you got to play nice.
Exactly. And it goes even further than that. The book describes how in some primate societies, mothers will actually actively boost their sons' social standing. They form these really powerful alliances that can make or break a male's position in the group.
Wow. And what's really hitting me is how much we tend to impose our own modern ideas about gender roles onto the past. Like we see a bigger, stronger male skeleton, and we just automatically jump to the conclusion, oh, they were the ones calling the shots, but what if we got it all wrong?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
It's one we'll be exploring in more detail as we keep going in our deep dive.
I am hooked. So if those early human societies were structured more like bonobos, with women at the center of things, how did we end up where we are today?
That's what makes it even more interesting.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, we should probably take a closer look at the evidence. Because while the book focuses a lot on primate behavior, it also really digs into what we know, and maybe more importantly, what we don't know, about those early human societies themselves.
Okay, let's do it. Let's dig in. What can those ancient bones tell us?
Yeah, it's easy to jump to conclusions, but you're right to be asking about the evidence, because the fossil record from those early periods, it's really like a puzzle, Like we've got some pieces, but there's a lot of gaps.
Okay, so how do we even begin to piece together those missing chapters? Like, what kind of clues can we get from the fossil record we do have?
Well, one example is Australopithecus. They were walking upright around, 3 million years ago. And their remains, they give us some interesting clues about early diets, which we were just talking about.
Oh, you mean like Lucy and her kin, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember learning about them in school. Weren't they thought to be mostly meat eaters?
Yeah, that's a pretty common misconception. It turns out later hominids, yeah, they definitely got into meat. But Australopithecus, they were rocking a plant-based diet. Their teeth and jaws suggest they were made for, grinding up tough fibrous plants.
Really? So no hunting for these early ancestors.
The evidence points to them being mostly herbivorous, kind of like our modern day gorilla cousins.
Huh.
And this actually supports the book's argument that hunting, like as a main way of getting food, may not be as central to early human evolution as we often think.
Okay, that is a pretty big shift in perspective. It really makes you wonder, like, what else we might have gotten wrong about them.
Exactly. And here's the thing. This plant-based diet, it wasn't just about survival. It might have actually been really important in our evolution.
Okay, I am intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, brains, they take up a lot of energy, right? They need tons of calories. And some scientists think that shifting to a more calorie-dense diet, which later on included meat and cooked food, that could have been a driving force behind why some hominids developed bigger brains.
So you're saying those plant-based meals, the ones our female Australopithecus ancestors were likely gathering, maybe that was fueling the brain power that ultimately led to, to us.
It's a fascinating idea to think about, right? It makes us rethink the role of gathering in those early societies. Even if we don't have, direct fossils showing women leading hunting parties or anything, but their contribution to survival, like bringing in those crucial calories, those nutrients, that can't be ignored.
It's like that saying, behind every great man. Well, maybe behind those evolving hominid brains, there were some really, really savvy female gatherers.
Exactly. It speaks to the power of working together, these collaborative survival strategies.
Totally. Okay, so we've got Australopithecus, our plant-powered ancestors. But the book also mentions this other intriguing character, Gigantopithecus. That name just, screams massive.
Right. Sadly, all we've found of Gigantopithecus are a few teeth and some jawbones. But even those little pieces, they tell us a lot.
So were they huge carnivores then?
Actually, totally the opposite. Despite their size, Gigantopithecus were probably gentle giants. They seem to have lived on a diet of tough, fibrous plants, probably loved bamboo.
Bamboo. Wow, those jaws must have been something else.
Right.
I can't help but picture them with those cute panda thumbs just stripping leaves off those stalks.
Ah, love it. Though that's total speculation for now. But here's where it gets really interesting, thinking about our deep dive. Remember those female-led social structures we talked about?
Yeah. You think Gigantopithecus might have been organized that way too?
We can't say for sure, but it's definitely a possibility. Gigantopithecus, they're part of the orangutan lineage. And while female orangutans are usually solitary, they have a lot of influence in their territories. They control access to resources, they choose their mates, and they're essential to their offspring's survival.
So it's not a huge leap to imagine those female Gigantopithecus, even with the big males around, they were still calling some of the shots.
Exactly. And this highlights how many different social structures might have existed in these early hominids. It's fascinating.
Okay, so we've got Australopithecus peacefully munching on their plants and Gigantopithecus, these possible giants of female influence. Where do we go from here on the timeline of human evolution?
Well, this is where it gets even more complex. We start seeing multiple hominid species all at the same time evolving, sometimes dying out. And as we get closer to our own species, Homo sapiens, those questions about social structures, gender roles, and yes, even diet, they become even more important to figure out how we got here.
So we've journeyed through millions of years, met our plant-loving ancestors, and even met a gentle giant. It's pretty clear that the story of early humans is way more complicated than we often think about.
Absolutely. It really is like opening a book and just realizing we're only starting to figure out the language.
Yeah.
Every new discovery adds a piece to the puzzle, but it also shows us just how much we still don't know.
And, one of the most interesting puzzles is how those early societies actually worked. We've talked about the possibility of female-centric structures, but what other clues can we find about how they lived?
Well, the book argues that we need to rethink this whole idea of survival of the fittest. We often picture early humans as, constantly fighting for dominance, like brute strength is the only thing that matters for survival. But what if cooperation and social intelligence were just as important, maybe even more so?
So instead of just the strongest always winning, you're suggesting a more complex picture where collaboration and strategic thinking played a huge role in their success.
Yes, exactly. And think about it. Those skills like cooperation, empathy, social strategizing, those often thrive in societies with strong female leadership. Now, I'm not saying that one gender is naturally better at these things, but just that for a really long time, those skills were essential for survival.
And if those early societies were more egalitarian, with women having influence alongside men,
Yeah.
it really makes you think, how did we end up with these hierarchical male-dominated structures we see throughout so much of history?
It really does. And I'm not trying to, romanticize the past or ignore the challenges those early humans faced. But it does make us question these deep-seated assumptions about gender roles and how those assumptions affect how we understand history.
It's like we're looking at the same evidence but with fresh eyes, considering possibilities that might have been missed or ignored in the past. And it's not just gender roles. Even the idea of domestication takes on a whole new meaning.
You're absolutely right. We tend to think of domestication as something we do to plants and animals, right? Like bending nature to our will. But what if, and this goes back to what we've been discussing, what if the first thing humans domesticated were their own social structures? What if they were creating more cooperative, more civilized ways of living together?
So instead of just controlling nature, early humans were also shaping their own social environments.
Right. They created societies that in a lot of ways allowed them to thrive.
That's a powerful idea,
It is.
and it's amazing to think about. So as we come to the end of our deep dive into the ancient past, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What can we really learn from those who were here millions of years ago?
For me, it comes down to this. We are the products of millions of years of evolution shaped by biology and by social forces. And even though we may never completely uncover every mystery about how our ancestors lived, it's our responsibility to keep asking questions, to challenge what we think we know, and to stay open to the possibility that the past might hold some really surprising lessons for us.
I love that. We might be separated by thousands of years, but those early humans, they were the pioneers of their time. They faced the challenges of their world with, like, real creativity and resilience. And in learning about their story, we might just uncover something really profound about ourselves. This has been The Deep Dive, reminding you to always question, always explore, and keep digging for those hidden truths. Until next time, stay curious.